south by ship, touching the island of Chiloé at its port of Castro, and then over the rest of an amazing 1,000-mile voyage, by open sea when weather permits, by the inland passage when the weather is bad. The destination is Punta Arenas, southernmost city in the world. On this voyage, the ship has made its way through a truly forbidding part of this world of ours. The channel, only a mile or so wide, is hemmed in by massive headlands laden with wild forests. Beyond the shores lie vast areas still unexplored. There is constant mist and rain to the amount of 200 inches per year. As we approach the Strait of Magellan, the coast becomes a labyrinth of narrow channels and countless islands. The resemblance to the fjords of Norway is very striking. Great glaciers, formed in deep Andean troughs, come down to a coast continuously lashed by rain and high winds. And back of these glaciers lies an extraordinary ice field, 200 miles long, largely unexplored. Yes, at journey's end, at the town of Punta Arenas, the world again takes on its accustomed look. After the long journey from the north, much of it through uninhabited regions, here is a busy and attractive little port of 25,000 inhabitants. Most of the men among the passengers are coming down for the annual shearing in the nearby sheep country. The statue of Magellan recalls to us the greatness of his achievement. He discovered a way to the Far East by sailing westward, a way to hurdle that great obstacle, the newfound continent of America. It was he who made the roundness of our globe a useful fact in the life of mankind. Tierra del Fuego. On calm days, one looks across the strait to the shores of a land bearing a name every schoolboy knows, Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire. To Punta Arenas clings the great tradition of the clipper ships, for these gallant vessels of the old sailing days had this as a port of call. Seeing the strait lashed by a 60-mile gale, one salutes the skill and hardihood of their crews, yes, and of Magellan's men too, who took their ships through from ocean to ocean. There are few days when the prevailing westerlies are not blowing. The grasslands withstand the stiff breezes well enough, but the trees have a hard time of it. We are in Chilean Patagonia now, and unlike the flatlands of Tierra del Fuego and of Argentina just to the north, this area is in some parts wooded and hilly, even mountainous. But trees exposed to the winds become weirdly deformed and denuded. And erosion has worked fantastic designs among the mountains. The sheep-raising area, appearing now in white, includes the flatlands of Chile reaching to the Atlantic on both sides of the Strait of Magellan, and a large part of the Patagonian plain of Argentina. Strangely enough, the great value of this region for sheep-raising was not realized until about 1877. When enterprising newcomers from England and Scotland started it all. By 1885, there were about 40,000 head of sheep. In another half dozen years, there were 500,000. And today, there are more than 3 million. The pasturage is excellent because rainfall is ample but not excessive, and because after the rain, strong winds dry the grazing lands. Prevailing temperatures favor the growth of the wool. Ownership of the ranges and herds is largely Chilean, but the management is commonly in the hands of experts from Great Britain or Ireland. Altogether, this is a sheep raiser's paradise, much like North Scotland or the Hebrides. It's pretty nice for the sheep, too. Of course, they don't know that each year about 1 million of them go to market to be turned into choice mutton. It is not unusual for one of the big estancias or ranches to be 50 miles long and 30 miles wide, to cover about 1 million acres, and to maintain sheep numbering hundreds of thousands. The ranges are so vast that some herders do not come in more than twice a year. This indeed is sheep raising on an heroic scale. The predominating breed of the sheep is a cross between the Merino and the Romney Marsh. The great event here in the Chilean sheep country is the clip, or shearing. The men who do this work are experts who turn up once each year. Many of them came in on the boat from Chiloé. The shearing is a heavy job, which takes from 6 weeks to 2 months. It is piecework, with an average man shearing about 100 sheep per day, and the most expert doing nearly twice that number. The men are unionized and well paid. Part of the skill in this work is in taking off the fleece all in one piece. For shearing on this scale, electric machinery is needed. The wool goes to expert graders who decide on its quality and classification. These specialists are often men who have come all the way from England just to do this work. Then the wool is baled. Again, it seems extraordinary, after traveling through 1,000 miles of spectacular unpopulated wilderness, to find this thriving industry. One of the results of the unionization of these men is that the employer is required to provide 3 or 4 pounds of fresh meat every day for each man. So the sheep shearer is not only paid well, he eats well. On the other hand, he is not employed by the year. And it must be said that if any of these men happens to detest mutton stew, he has made an unfortunate choice of a profession. As for the sheep, what they get after the shearing is a complete surprise. A nice thorough dipping in a bath of creosote. Whether they really like it or not is open to question, but it's good for them. It prevents disease. And even a sheep likes to feel well. Soon the sheep will go out again for another year on the range, while their recent coats of fleecy wool, now carefully baled, start the journey to the docks at Punta Arenas, and from there to countless spindles and looms in distant lands. South Chile remains one of the world's few frontiers. In all of this region, from Chiloé to Cape Horn, live only 1% of Chile's population. And yet how richly rewarding to the observer who seeks the uncommon in what the world has to offer. And who knows? Someday all of this may become a great vacation center, the Switzerland of the Western Hemisphere. In the meantime, South Chile has not quite its counterpart anywhere on the globe. It is fascinating in its strangeness, in the aloofness of much of it to man, in its mysteries and in its unsolved problems. Fascinating, too, in its sheer, stark beauty.
Le troisième type de propriété qui nous paraît bien illustrer les problèmes actuels du Chili, nous avons fait pour le rencontrer un merveilleux voyage vers le sud. Le survol des derniers sommets des Andes, des Tours de Peine et du canal de Beagle, qui est comme une mer bordée parfois de glaciers. Ce champ et ces quelques bidons, c'est le terrain d'atterrissage de la dernière Espérance, Ultima Esperanza, qui n'est qu'un lieu-dit, mais un lieu-dit de 85 000 hectares appartenant à une société britannique qui élève des moutons, à raison d'1 mouton par hectare. Pour ces 85 000 moutons, 20 bergers seulement, dont vous visitez la maison en ce moment. Au contraire des inquilinos, les bergers ont fait accepter une convention collective qui leur assure un salaire de 35 à 40 000 francs par mois et un horaire de travail très précis. Ainsi, par exemple, de 10h à 10h20 du matin, smoke, pause pour la cigarette. L'après-midi, travail de 13 à 14h30, puis repos jusqu'à 3h moins le quart, puis travail jusqu'à 16h, puis à 16h... Oui, thé. On a beau savoir que la société en question est anglaise, voir un berger de Patagonie descendre de cheval pour se faire une tasse de thé, cela étonne. Une autre surprise émouvante, celle-ci, au milieu de ces 85 000 hectares perdus vraiment au bout du monde, Madame Nelson, la femme de l'administrateur, nous a reçus en français. Vous êtes chilienne, Madame Nelson?
Je suis britannique.
Vous vivez ici depuis 15 ans. Où habitiez-vous avant?
Dans le nord d'Angleterre.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a décidé à venir si loin?
Je me suis mariée et moi, j'avais décidé que je ne m'épousais pas jusqu'à trouver l'homme que je pourrais suivre jusqu'au bout du monde. Pieds nus, je l'ai fait. Je suis pas pieds nus, mais je suis au bout du monde.
C'est merveilleux de pouvoir parler français en pleine Patagonie. Comment
Oui, mais je ne parle pas très bien. Il y a beaucoup de temps, je n'ai pas parlé français.
Il y a 20 ans, vous n'avez pas parlé français.
Oui, plus ou moins.
Pourquoi parlez-vous français si bien? Pourquoi parlez-vous français si bien?
J'ai été à Paris 3 ans et j'ai étudié le français.
Où habitiez-vous à Paris?
Rue Monsieur le Prince, dans le quartier latin.
Vous ne vous sentez pas perdu ici?
Un petit peu, de temps en temps.
La ville la plus proche est à 65 km d'ici, au sud. C'est la Thalès. Et
oui.
Au nord, qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
Au nord, il n'y a rien.
À l'est?
Il n'y a rien.
À l'ouest?
Non plus.
Lorsque vous avez besoin d'un médecin?
On doit appeler un avion de Punta Arenas.
Ça fait 300 km. Ça.
Oui.
Quelles sont vos distractions ici?
L'aquarelle.
L'aquarelle.
Monter à cheval. J'écris un peu.
Vous ne vous ennuyez pas?
Non, je n'ennuie pas.
Vous recevez des journaux d'Angleterre?
Oui, d'Angleterre, de la France.
Combien de temps met-il pour venir?
À peu près 2-3 mois.
Qu'est-ce qui vous manque le plus ici?
Je ne sais pas. De temps en temps, on manque une coiffeuse, les danses, les distractions, les enfants. On est contente. On est avec son mari et les enfants.
Vous m'avez dit l'odeur d'un croissant.
Ah oui, ça me manque beaucoup. L'odeur des croissants, le café le matin, ces arbres, dans le printemps, dans les boulevards et tout ça. Les voyages, que j'aime beaucoup voyager.
On ne pense pas à la guerre ici, je pense.
J'en pense beaucoup, comme tout le monde.
cuánta arenas ya va quedando atrás y la cerrazón cubre más y más el blanco camino que el ovejero lleva en su vida, vida que el viento azota sin compasión, detrás de un piño que a veces muere de frío, detrás de las esperanzas que nunca son. De lejos se siente el grito del ovejero.